Hey, millionaire. We've all had dreams of making it big one day, of living that lifestyle of the rich and famous. But did you know that a lot of people living the American dream were out on the streets once? That's right, many of the people on our screens living good lives went from rags to riches. Today, we're going over some of the stories of huge celebrities that used to be completely homeless. I'll end the list with one of my favorite actors of all time. Now, let's dive in. Number 15. Halle Berry. Her iconic Catwoman performance will go down in history. But before she landed the role and won the Academy Award, Halle Berry had to see a lot of struggles. Chasing her dream of one day making it onto the big screen, she landed in New York, but she quickly ran out of money. She asked her mother for help, but was turned away. Talk about tough love, right? Berry had to stay in homeless shelters and then in a YMCA until she could afford her place. According to her, this taught her some very important lessons. She got comfortable with being uncomfortable. Looking at how utterly successful her career has been, we can't argue with that. Number 14. Chris Pratt. We've all seen Pratt's transformation from the lovable Andy Dwyer on Parks and Rec to the heartthrob he is in Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World. But that isn't the only transition the actor hero has gone through in his life. Before making it big, Pratt was sleeping in a rundown, flea-infested van. As soon as he got the chance to be cast in a film named Cursed Part 3, he knew it was his way to get out. With many iconic roles on his resume and a long list of voice acting credits, Pratt has come a long way from that van in Hawaii, where he was working whatever job he could get. He even worked as a stripper once. That's how hard he had to work to survive. Number 13. Shania Twain. She's a country queen, and she's won 5 Grammys. There's nothing Shania Twain hasn't accomplished. But even before she conquered the charts, when she was just Eileen Regina Edwards, Twain was still showing strength far beyond her years. When she was 13, her mother took Shania and her siblings away from an abusive home to live in a homeless shelter in Toronto. The family had to spend the night in a sweltering room with way too many people and not enough beds. She struggled with poverty and domestic violence, and even slept at bus stations when she had to provide for her younger siblings when her parents passed away in a car accident when she was 22. Today, having sold over 100 million records, Twain is one of the best-selling female artists in the country music business. Looks like she's made it, and she's enjoying all the luxuries life has to offer. But with an estimated net worth of $350 million, how could she not? But if there's one person that can teach you nothing is impossible, it's the queen of 90s country herself. Well, she and the Latina legend herself. Number 12. Jennifer Lopez. Hasn't everyone fought with their parents occasionally? Well, Jennifer Lopez took it one step further. When the diva butted heads against her mother, who was stopping her from chasing her dreams to become a dancer, she took matters into her own hands, moving out of her parents' house. She ended up couch surfing. Most of the time, her meals were nothing more than one slice of pizza a day. But her lucky break would come soon. J-Lo ended up landing a job as a dancer in Europe, and it's all been uphill from there. Today, Lopez is one of the most recognized faces on earth. She's a dancer, an actress, a singer, and a designer with an estimated net worth of $400 million. There's no one who doesn't know her. Apart from Mariah Carey, maybe. Number 11. Steve Harvey. If being homeless is bad enough, imagine it's going on for 3 years straight. Back in the 80s, when he was just starting as a comedian, Harvey struggled to find his footing. When a few of his gigs fell through, he was suddenly without a place to live. Unable to earn enough from the odd jobs he worked to buy actual housing, he ended up living in his 1976 Ford Tempo for 3 whole years. His life is a good example of how hard it can be to even just get by. He lived on bologna sandwiches and showered at gas stations and swimming pools to go to small stand-up comedian gigs until he was called to be on Showtime at the Apollo. Today, Harvey has several TV shows, including Family Feud, and has also hosted the Miss Universe pageant for 2 years. Although maybe Columbia isn't too happy about his wrong announcement in 2015. Hey, at least it gave the internet something to laugh at. Speaking of the internet, we have a tech mogul coming up next. Number 10. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs' big brand and the abundance of iPhones made him a household name across the world. But even if his name is synonymous with money today, he wasn't always rolling in dollar bills. What if we told you that the man who was a co-founder, former chairman, and CEO of Apple used to be broke and homeless? His situation was so bad that he couldn't even afford a dorm room as a student and had to sleep on the floor in his friends' rooms. To get money for food, he'd return Coke bottles and walked 7 miles every Sunday night just because that was the one time he can get a good meal at the Hare Krishna temple. That's not the kind of life anyone should live. Luckily, his story would soon take a turn for the better. When he died in 2011, he was one of the richest men in the world. He did start from the bottom, but made the best of his life. It takes sheer hard work and talent to do that. Number 9. Dr. Phil. He's America's most famous psychologist. He's a talk show host, and he has an annual salary of over $70 million. His house in Beverly Hills is more like a palace than a house, so it's surprising that in the 60s, he was living out on the streets. Guess we shouldn't judge how hard someone has to work, huh? Phil McGraw was born to a very poor traditional American family, and he faced homelessness and poverty when he was just a child. For a very large part of his early life, he was living in a car with his father. Dr. Phil's father interned as a psychologist as well. Eventually, they were able to afford a room at the downtown YMCA for $5 a week. Makes you wonder about that $5 you spent on coffee, huh? McGraw would go on to obtain his degree in psychology and would become a regular on Oprah until he launched his own show. Today, he's worth over $400 million. Number 8. Kelly Clarkson. She's the original American Idol. But if we rewind a little, Kelly Clarkson had come to LA chasing a dream, but tragedy soon turned its head to her. Her apartment was burned down in a fire. She'd given up everything to come to LA. She had no contacts, no money, and nowhere to go. Forced to live in her car or shelters and facing unemployment, Clarkson went through a very difficult time in her life. She didn't have a top to wear to the audition that would be her big break. She had to make one herself. Today, she's the most successful winner of the competition and a household name in America. Kelly Clarkson came back from a house fire that took away everything she had. What's your excuse? Hit the subscribe button before we get to all the celebrities left on the list. You have about 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Hopefully, by subscribing to us, you'll learn that with the right mindset, you can recover from even rock bottom. Now keep watching. Number 7. Daniel Craig. Right, James Bond himself. There's a lot you can learn from the character we've all come to love, but the man behind has just as much to offer. Before he landed his leading role and became one of the most well-known faces in the industry, he used to sleep on park benches in London as a struggling actor. In the early stages of his career, Craig worked minimum wage jobs to support himself. Sometimes, that's what it takes to get your big break. Today, his net worth is estimated at $150 million. He doesn't have to sleep on park benches anymore, unless he wants to. Number 6. Hilary Swank. She's a $1 million baby, and if you learn from her example, you might be too. When Hilary Swank's mother separated from her father, she whisked the teenager off from their trailer park to Los Angeles. With $75 to their name and a mobile card, they drove down to California hoping to become a star. The pair lived in their car for a long time, and then they moved into a house a friend owned. According to Hilary, there was no furniture because the friend wanted to sell the house. So they bought an air mattress that they used to inflate every night and leave every morning. Now, she has 2 Academy Awards under her belt, and she's known as one of the most talented actresses of her generation. It's tough to make it in life. Sometimes you'll have to sleep on an air mattress, or as you'll come to see, at a train station. Number 5. Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stallone's story is one of the most inspiring tales ever. The actor had worked against all odds to become one of the most commercially successful action movie stars of all time, but he had to struggle for a long time. His Rocky series was rejected repeatedly, and even if they were accepted, he was not allowed to have a lead role. He was evicted from his New York apartment after he failed to pay rent, and he found himself sleeping at a bus station for 3 weeks straight. Things got so bad, he had to sell his dog for $50. Now that hurts. But then, he got his lucky break. Just 1 week later, his script was sold, and he bought his dog back for $3,000. The rest is history. But even if Stallone struggled for years, he remained dedicated. If he had given up his script without the leading role, things might have been easier for him, but then we wouldn't see him on top of the world today either. And here's another example of being dedicated and knowing your worth. Number 4. James Cameron. When Cameron was writing The Terminator, not only was he just barely making ends meet, but he was also without a roof over his head for some time. But despite the struggles, Cameron knew that he wanted to direct his screenplay, and even if production companies hated the idea of him being in charge. Eventually, Cameron would go on to partner with Gail Ann Hurd, who bought the script for $1 and named Cameron the director. See what happens when you stick to your beliefs? Number 3. Heather Mills. Heather Mills' family was always struggling with money. Her father demanded that she and her siblings find food on their own, and they turned to shoplifting as a result. When Mills was a teenager, she ran away from home and had to live in the arches of London Waterloo. She even had to join a traveling circus. Today, she's a former model and ex-wife of former Beatle Paul McCartney. She's come a long way from the streets of London, but that doesn't mean she's forgotten her roots. She phrased it best herself in an interview. According to her, homelessness is what you make of it, and she chose to make a success of it. Are you going to succeed in your life? Number 2. Jewel. When the 90s icon released her debut album, she was an overnight success. She'd go on to sell more platinum albums and sing to sold-out venues. She even has 4 Grammys, but all that is easy to see. If we rewind a little, it wasn't always like this. After she was fired from her job, Jewel was homeless for a year and even almost died in a parking lot. But she kept writing songs and eventually landed a job in a local coffee shop. She'd go on to have one of the most successful debuts in history and have a net worth of over $14 million. Not bad for a girl who used to live out in her VW, huh? But we've finally got to number 1. Are you excited? This one's a shocker. Number 1. Jim Carrey. It's hard to imagine Jim Carrey as anything other than the comedian and actor who's making everyone laugh. But he had one of the roughest upbringings. When his father was fired from his job, his family was forced to move into a single van. Carrey had to do 8-hour shifts in a factory while he was still in school. He even dropped out of school, and his family would drive to different places in Canada, and he'd take up jobs like being a janitor to help his family with the bills. According to Carrey, he's grateful for this time though, because it led him to develop his sense of humor. Leave it to him to make the best out of a bad situation. Doesn't everyone love his sense of humor? These people are the perfect example of just how much you can rise with hard work, dedication, and the will to succeed. That's about it for this one. Which celebrity story inspired you the most? Let us know. Like this video? Check this one out too.